we will talk about what is traditional perspective of Hatha Yoga. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwarah, Guru Sakshat Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Yeah, there are many views which is prevalent in the world about Hatha Yoga. So if we go to the origin of Hatha Yoga and how the Hatha Yoga Pradipika was authored by Swatmaram, then it becomes clear what exactly is the Hatha Yoga. First, Hatha Yoga Pradipika. Pradipika means light or the knowledge. So the text is meant to give the knowledge of Hatha Yoga. And the author of the text is Swatmaram, is one of the many authentic texts of yoga. Like there are Dattatreya Yoga Shastra, Hiranda Samhita, Goraksh Satakam, Hatha Ratnavali, Yajnavalka Samhita, Yajnavalk Smriti, Shiv Swaroday, Yoga Shikho Upanishad.
Is it true? I learned that it's also mentioned in the Abhud Gita and Garaksha.
Let us go step by step, so we will talk
Okay.
about that also.
Okay.
The earliest text of Hatha Yoga is Yoga Shikho Upanishad and Hatha Ratnavali. Dattatreya Yoga Shastra was written around 13th century, much earlier than Hatha Yoga Pradipika. And Dattatreya Yoga Shastra organized different limbs of yoga into 8 limbs. Patanjali 8 limbs of yoga were attributed to the teachings of Yajnavalkya. It is said that 8 limbs were the first taught by the great master Kapila, author of the Sankhya Yoga around 2000 BC, around 3000 years before. And Hatha Yoga Pradipika was written in 1400, almost around 600 or 700 years before. But they have its root in all these texts and the teachings of the great masters. That needs to be. We are going little bit in a chronological way. Then we will understand whether your perspective is 100% right or we need to correct our perspective of Hatha Yoga. Unlike Gheranda Samhita is a dialogue between a master and a disciple, the Hatha Yoga was written based on the teachings of these great masters. And many of the verses were taken from the different texts, including the verses from Yajnavalk Smriti. So it means we have to understand the Hatha Yoga from that perspective. So in Hatha Yoga, we say asana, Shatkarma, asana, pranayama, mudra, dhyana, meditation, and samadhi. So the moment we include meditation and samadhi, it talks about the essential nature, how we can separate Hatha Yoga as a physical preparation only. When the Hatha Yoga Pradipika says the limbs of Hatha Yoga, not only yama, niyama, asana, that we will understand once we pick up the verses. So before we go deeper in Hatha Yoga text, there is no right definition of Hatha Yoga. But the mention, the Hatha Yoga came from these great masters. So we have to understand Hatha Yoga from the context of these great masters who have originated. So in Siddha Siddhanta Paddhati, in Yog Shikho Upanishad, Hatha Yoga is known as Akara Kirtitah Suryeshtakara Chandra Uchyate Surya Chandra Masur Yogo Hatha Yogo Nigadhate. Ha means Surya Swar. Tha means moon flow. Akara Kirtitah Suryeshtakara Chandra Uchyate Surya Chandra Masur Yogo. When we join sun and the moon flow, the Hatha Yoga is achieved. So when we look into the definition of Hatha Yoga, how can we say that Hatha Yoga is only a physical preparation? It has nothing to do with my essential nature. Akarah kirtata suryeshtakaraschandra uchyate surya chandra masuri yogo jivatma paramatmano evam tu dvanda jalasya sanyogo yogityukto. Javal Darshan Upanishad says what this Hatha Yoga, after explaining the union between individual and transcendental supreme consciousness, union between sun and moon flow, union between Shiva and Shakti, then evam tu dvandajalasya sanyogo yogityukto. That is most important from the Upanishad. Remember, teachings of the Upanishads are considered as an authority. Whether it is Hatha Yoga, Raj Yoga, they are considered the supreme text. You cannot refuse, you cannot refute, you cannot disagree. If you disagree, you are not learning yoga, you are not studying yoga. Every master has that opinion. So, this Upanishad, the last verse says, Evam tu dvandajalasya sanyogo yogatyaptu dvandajalasya. There is a network of, what is that network? There is a network of illusion and delusion, because of which we consider there are two. In fact, there is only one essential nature. There is only one essential nature. People may have different opinion, let them have it. I may have a different opinion of Einstein. It does not mean that uh, I can change physics. Whatever the Einstein theory of relativity, it exists. He had a great contribution. Newton's law of motion. So I have to go to the basics. If I don't go to the basics, then I am not understanding. Now, in the first verse, Shri Adinath Namastu Namastu Tasmai. What he says, salutation to the Adinath, who discovered and passed the knowledge of Hatha Yoga, which is a ladder to reach to the highest journey of Raj Yoga. We have to understand it clearly. It is believed that Lord Shiva gave the knowledge of Hatha Yoga first to his wife. There are many texts available which are dialogue between the Shiva and Shivani, his wife. Now, can we ignore the teachings of Hatha Yoga in the Gita? Answer is no. Gita is again a complete text. So the reference in the Gita in the 4th chapter comes. What comes? He says that union between apana and prana, prana into apana and apana into prana, When we unite prana into apana and apana into prana, we destroy suffering. Suffering pertains not to the body, suffering pertains to the mind. Mind is the cause of suffering, mind is the cause of realization. So, with reference to the Hatha Yoga, he is again, Krishna is referring that this union leads to the finding of the real nature. Whether we understand it or not, whether we accept it or not, it doesn't matter. So, understanding this, there are three bodies. You see that Hatha Yoga Pradipika, when it was written, they have not to take the essential verses, otherwise the book will become so big. But they are indirectly referring. Many of the verses are taken from these great texts. Obviously, it means that the Hatha Yoga originated from there. So I cannot separate it. The Hatha Yoga definition aligns with the yoga definition by Patanjali. So, network of delusion is to be removed. What is that delusion? That there are prana and there are two, individual and supreme consciousness. In fact, they are one. But I do not understand. So, I cannot understand intellectually. I cannot gain the right knowledge. So, the teacher says, start with the body, start doing the physical practices. So, when we start doing the physical practices, yes, there is another term that is used, which is very important. We will go to that. But first, Hatha Yoga definition aligns with the Patanjali definition of yoga. When you unite individual and supreme consciousness, it can only be done when the mind is empty. Patanjali says, Yoga's chitta vritti nirodha. So whether I use plane to reach to you or car to reach to you, or I can walk on the foot. So when I walk on the foot, I'm doing the physical practices. But we should not forget the goal of yoga, any school of yoga. Goal of every school of yoga is to find the essential nature. I may have a different opinion, what should we do? But the goal of every yoga is to realize the self. Realization of this self is to find the essential nature. And that is what the real self is. But that is what we do. In Yoga Tattva Upanishad, which is a very formative text of Hatha Yoga, many verses were taken from that into the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. What he says, he wants the seeker. What he wants the seeker? He wants there is a verse, I relate to you the means to be employed for destruction of delusion. Without the practice of yoga, how could knowledge of the real self end sorrow and suffering? Then he explains, how could the practice of yoga alone, devoid of knowledge, succeed in the task? Without knowing my essential nature, yoga practice is just not a practice. The seeker of liberation must direct his energies to both simultaneously the knowledge of the real self and the practice. So here the practice means the Hatha Yoga. So the cause of unhappiness and suffering lies in ignorance. Can you remove ignorance by asana, pranayama? No, that is a preparation. But if the preparation does not have a foundation of the knowledge, How can you achieve yoga? I'm not saying. This is what the Yoga Tattva Upanishad says. Yoga Tattva Upanishad was written around 150 AD. How much? So 600, maybe 700 years ago, before Hatha Yoga, Pradipika, and Gheranda Samhita were written. And many verses were taken from there. So your understanding varies because it depends on your own preferences and opinion. Our teachings of the masters never says that. Yoga Tattva Upanishad, master of the text, warns the seeker that merely practice means asana, pranayama, mudra will not end sorrow and suffering, and mere knowledge cannot end suffering. Both has to be together. So in Hatha Yoga Pradipika, the stress is both on the knowledge and the practice correctly. Let us go a little deeper to understand. We say Shiva. Huh? In the very first, simply we should not understand the salutation to the Shiva who expounded the knowledge of Hatha Yoga. Can you tell me where the Shiva says the Hatha Yoga needs to be practiced separately from knowing the essential nature? If that is so, we will say, yes, Hatha Yoga is different. Hatha Yoga is simply a preparation at the physical level. It has nothing to do with the real self and essential nature. Can you tell me any verse, any teaching? So when we say that is why this master rightly pointed out Swatmaram salutation to the Adinath Siva who expounded the knowledge of Hatha Yoga. So it is believed that Shiva taught to his wife about this Hatha Yoga, and it is in a dialogue form. But the Shiva has a pre-Vedic root. And when the Shiva has a pre-Vedic root, and the Shiva represents all the main text, the goal is to find the real self and essential nature. It is not my opinion. Why should I have my opinion in teaching the particular knowledge? Then came another master, Dattatreya. Dattatreya is known as the Lord of Yoga. He is referred in almost majority of the text. Before we go there, so he is referred in the majority of the text. He contributed to the literature of the Eastern wisdom for so many centuries. And the Dattatreya Yoga Shastra, the book written much earlier, many of the teachings of the Hatha Yoga coming from the Dattatreya. Remember, I am saying he is known as the Lord of Yoga. Even much before Patanjali came, even before Swatmaram has written this text.
Hang on. Are you talking to him? Okay, sorry.
So, this is one way to say that. Now, going little further, Yajnavalkya is a great master. Yajnavalkya was a great master, and I narrated the story. He had two wives, Maitreyi and Gargi, and he, in front of thousands of the monks, including his wife, passed on the knowledge of Hatha Yoga, Raj Yoga together. Raj Yoga together. So when Hatha Yoga says salutation to Adinatha, salutation simply does not mean that I do namaste. I'm doing namaste because I'm passing on this tradition which is continuing from the previous master. What tradition was passing on? To find the real self. Is the tradition passing on of only the physical postures or some breathing practices? If that is so, then accept that. It has nothing to do with the real tradition of yoga. There is a way, if even the Yoga Alliance says that you teach Hatha Yoga Pradipika, so we should teach Hatha Yoga Pradipika in a right manner. Right manner. I can easily understand your questions and your objections about real self. So, coming back to Yajnavalkya is considered one of the great masters who publicly discussed this yoga, including the Hatha Yoga. Going further, going further, the great master, his book is Yajnavalkya Samhita. That is one work. Samhita means the collection of verses, collection of teachings. There is another book, Yajnavalkya Smriti, the memorable verses from the Yajnavalkya explained eight-limbed path of Hatha Yoga with addition of kundalini practices. So the moment we talk of kundalini, we talk of nadi, we talk of 10 different nadis, the prana, we are talking of Yajnavalkya Samhita. Did Yajnavalkya Samhita says that only physical practice is Hatha Yoga? If it says, then we will accept it. So instead of Hatha Yoga, Yajnavalkya said this is Siddha Yoga. Kundalini and Hatha Yoga. Yajnavalkya explained Siddha Yoga, Kundalini and Hatha Yoga in the presence of thousands of monks, including his wife. When his wife asked that, what is this all? Yoga. Third. So we started with the Shiva. We understood Dattatreya, who has also explained the Hatha Yoga. Then the Yajnavalkya also explained the Siddha Yoga, Hatha Yoga. So many masters started thinking that as if the Hatha Yoga should be included, the Kundalini, and that is what the Hatha Yoga Pradipika also explains. Many of the aspects of Kundalini. So why you only think that only physical practices are there when Hatha Yoga says Dhyan and Samadhi is also there, and the Samadhi can also be attained by practice of Kundalini? So why I should think that only physical practices has to do with Hatha Yoga? Now understand another word he uses, Adinatha. Shiva is known as Adinatha. The word Adinatha means first among the Natha tradition. Natha means master, owner, savior. So Shiva is the first originator of yoga. That is how, what is the meaning of the first verse? Simply saying salutation to the Adinatha does not make any sense. Salutation means that I'm continuing the tradition. There are nine Natha, which are very famous. Gorakshnatha, Matsendranath, Shailnatha, and there are Achal. There are a lot of Nathas there, which names are perhaps written in there. Pranamya Shri Gurum Natha, second verse. Yogi Swatmaram, after saluting his first guru, Srinatha explains Hatha Yoga for the attainment of Raj Yoga. Owing, yes, we will also understand this Raj Yoga and Hatha Yoga, why we feel that we should separate it, and why Hatha Yoga Pradipika then mentioned meditation and the Samadhi. Why he has mentioned as an organ limbs of Hatha Yoga. Is he explaining the stages of yoga? Is he explaining the external yoga and the internal yoga? But both are yoga. So if both are yoga, obviously we come to the same conclusion. So this Natha tradition influences this master Swatma Ram to write Hatha Yoga. And the Natha tradition has the same goal to find the real self and to find the real nature. Another part, Yajnavalkya explained 10 yama. I'm giving a brief of Hatha Yoga in this first session. So the Hatha Yoga Pradipika also mentions 10 yama and niyamas. They may be little different. It is the first time the Yajnavalkya mentions there are 10 yamas, there are 10 niyamas, from where they have come, from the Yajnavalkya. What Yajnavalkya says about Hatha Yoga to find the real self. Evam tu dandajalasya sanyogo yogityuktu. We have to understand that. If we do not understand one thing and we do not accept, that is secondary thing. Secondary thing. So then 10 yamas, he has explained 10 niyama, 10 yamas, and then he explained perhaps I would say 14 nadis that we will take up later. And then he has explained the mudras, he has explained the shat karma, which is a very important part of the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. He has explained the pranayama a little differently, which has been further explained by the Swatmaram of the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. I means, and pratyahara, he has deeply explained the pratyahara. If pratyahara is a part of Raj Yoga, why it is written in Hatha Yoga? Hatha Yoga Pradipika. Why? To withdraw the mind inside. Why meditation? Why samadhi? But we gave little importance to these things. We find practice of asana is a great, quite attractive. So now going little deeper into this, I think it is better to understand that also. In uh, in Yajnavalkya Smriti, he has explained 8 asanas that we will take up later. So, going little further, Gorakshnath, the Natha tradition, salutation to the Adinatha. Gorakshnath is one of the foremost master considered of Hatha Yoga, Tantra, and Kundalini tradition. He rightly says, Hasiba, Kheliba, Kariba, Dhyanam, Ahanisi, Kathita, Brahman Gyanam. We have to find our real nature in a calm mind, in a relaxed mind. Very clear, he said. Another uh, verse from the Goraksha, what he says, he now, yes, now come to the first verse again. So if we go to the salutation to the Adinatha who expounded the knowledge of Hatha Yoga, which like a staircase leads the aspirant to the high pinnacled Raj Yoga. Understand the main points here. Every text of Eastern wisdom first is written with the salutation to the God or the Guru because the knowledge is passed on from the master to the seeker. Salutation to the Shiva indicates that the author Swatmaram is paying gratitude to the originator of yoga. Another point, Swatmaram is the author, clarifies that he is not Hatha Yoga originator, but Shiva is. So should I follow Shiva or should I follow Swatmaram? The author says the Hatha Yoga leads to Raj Yoga. So there it means what? The Hatha Yoga is incomplete. Means what? Can yoga be incomplete? So that is why he points out in the different verses in the next chapter that it is external part, external yoga that prepares the seeker for a higher yoga, which can be known as Raja Yoga. Be very clear why he has added dhyana, pratyahara, dharana, dhyan, and samadhi in the limbs of yoga, 6 limbs of yoga. So he is trying to explain in parts. The goal of yoga is self-realization, to find the real self. It reveals the knowledge of the real self that ends suffering and awakens to permanent happiness, love, truth, and wisdom. Hatha Yoga has how many? I think maybe 390 or 389, perhaps I'm not mistaken. 389 verses, includes principles, philosophy, and practice. Principles, philosophy, practice. That is the way the Eastern wisdom is explained. Now go to the second verse. What the second verse says, Yogi Swatmaram, the author of the book, says that Hatha Yoga should be practiced to attain Raj Yoga. The author is stressing that Raj Yoga is internal and real yoga. What I'm doing, I'm driving. What is the goal? I'm driving to your house. So which is more important? Simply driving or driving to your house? I must have a destination. So one approach is Hatha Yoga. The other approach is Bhakti Yoga. Where I'm going to temple. Why I'm going to the temple? To worship Krishna. Why I want to worship Krishna? To find my real nature. We don't want to understand that. So when we do not want to understand, then there is a problem. So Hatha Yoga is a preparatory practice that includes yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, shatkarma, measured diet, and mudra. I'm preparing my car, whether I have fuel. Destination is your house. So how should I explain? No, I will leave the destination. I will only explain the preparatory part. That is what the Hatha Yoga is. All organs of Hatha Yoga, we can say milestones. Now see that why remove misconception about Hatha Yoga and Raj Yoga, the third sutra. Owing to the darkness arising from the multiplicity of opinions, people are unable to know Raj Yoga. Look at it. How clear it is. That is why I told you to study, to read at least the first chapter clearly. Owing to the darkness means ignorance arising from the multiplicity of opinions. You have your opinion, I may have your opinion, but I have to follow the tradition. Opinion doesn't matter. Knowledge matters. Compassionate Swatmaram composes the Hatha Yoga Pradipika like a torch to dispel it. Remember, this is very important. Yes, there is one way. What is the normal trend that is going on? We should follow the normal trend. Leave that then there is no use. Yoga aims at removing ignorance so that the knowledge of the reality is revealed in meditation. The samadhi is the highest limb of all yogas. So Atmaram never forget to put dhyana and samadhi and pratyahar as the limbs of Hatha Yoga. The author clearly states that there are wrong notions prevalent among master seekers about yoga. So what he's pointing out, can we guess? Asana is not yoga, but organ and preparatory step of yoga that leads to pranayama. Pranayama is not yoga, but a preparatory step that leads to pratyahara. Pratyahara is not the real yoga. The author makes it amply clear that Hatha Yoga goal is Raj Yoga. Again, specifically, we have to remove the wrong notion. Preparatory and practice of Hatha Yoga cannot lead to suffering. Why? People have a wrong notion that this is what the Hatha Yoga is. So I should practice this only. Leave the knowledge part. The knowledge part comes as a Raj Yoga. So that is why he differentiated. He differentiated because of ignorance. He did not differentiate because they two are separate disciplines. If they are separate discipline, then he should not have explained. That is the meaning. Now go to the fourth one. Matsendra Goraksh knew Hatha Vidya, and by their favor, Yogi Swatmaram also learnt it from them. Ask Matsendranath and Gorakshnath whether they have separated Hatha Yoga and Raj Yoga as you think. If they have separated, we will accept it. Where is the problem? We will accept it that Matsendranath and Gorakshnath knew Hatha Vidya, Hatha knowledge. Fourth verse. Hatha Vidyam hi Matsendra Gorakshadhya Vijanate. They knew it. And their favor I learned. Author is clearly saying. Reading intellectually does not make any sense unless we have some reference. The following siddhas. Now, for the sake of our understanding, he says, don't think what I have written in the text is the real sense. Go to these series of the traditional masters. So in the fifth verse, he named the different masters. In the sixth verse, he also says Mean Manan, Manthana, Bhairava, Siddhi, Buddha, a lot of masters. Find out these masters in our tradition. Have they separated Hatha Yoga not to find the real self? If it is so, we will accept it. Where is the problem? There is no problem. Until ninth verse, these Mahasiddhas, great masters, breaking the scapt of the death, are roaming in the universe. Go to the 10th. Go to the 10th verse. That will make amply clear. What is the 10th verse? Like a house protecting one from the heat of the sun. Hatha Yoga protects its practitioner from burning heat of the three tapas. Three tapas, three suffering, physical suffering, mental suffering, and natural suffering. What is the goal of yoga? To bring an end to the suffering. How I can bring an end to the suffering? To find the real nature. It is amply clear from the traditional wisdom, even if it is not written there. Three tapa. So three tap. The moment we say three tap, we means Adi Bhautik, Adi Devik, Adhyatmik, the threefold suffering. To bring an end to the threefold suffering is the goal of yoga. Can you bring an end to the suffering by only physical practices, by breathing only? If that is so, except Hatha Yoga is totally different from Raj Yoga. Okay, let why knowledge and practice of Hatha Yoga should be kept secret. Verse number 11. Verse number 11. A seeker who aspires for success. Why he says this? Knowledge of yoga is a royal secret and an open secret. I think you may remember we discussed about it. It is a royal secret and it is an open secret. We cannot give an atom bomb in the hands of a kid. But what it means a person treading the path should become a seeker. The moment you become a seeker, it becomes an open secret to you. What is that open secret? To remove the ignorance. Why to remove the ignorance? To find the real self. To become a seeker, person has to listen, learn from the teacher, basic principles of yoga, followed by contemplation before starting the practice, which is very common principles and basics in the journey of yoga. Why the masters appointed many masters earlier? Because there is no style of yoga. First. Second, when he refers Hatha Yoga and the Raj Yoga, they are not different. They are different approaches to the same goal. So when a person doesn't become a seeker, then it has to be kept secret. So let us keep it a secret. Now go to the 12th. I'm just, no, go to the 12th, yes. Now coming to the, yes, but it is good because Gherand Samhita is also written during more or less the same period. So in Gherand Samhita, I find such a great verse that makes it clear. No, Gherand Samhita is totally different. It belongs to the same tradition. Nasti maya samam pasho, nasti yogat param balam, nasti jnanat paro bandhu, nahi ahankarat paro ripu. In Gherand Samhita, you can find in the 4th verse in the 1st chapter, there is no bondage like delusion and ignorance. Why he has written this verse in the Hatha Yoga? Gherand Samhita is also a Hatha Yoga text. Why he has written? No, but we must argue that why the Hatha Yoga Pradipika has not written. These are topical texts. What are complete texts? Written by the great masters. What are the complete texts? Upanishads. What is a complete text? Patanjali Yoga Sutra. What is a complete text? Gita. So these are topical texts. They discuss specifically on a particular topic. But sometimes the masters find a particular principle is more important to be mentioned. So in Gherand Samhita, there is no bondage like ignorance, no greater power than the yoga, no greater friend than the knowledge. Knowledge of what? Knowledge of real self. And no greater enemy than egoism. Egoism creates different opinion. No, I have to argue with you. Yes, argue with these great masters. Argue with these great masters. Just to give you a blueprint of what is there. Now go to, I think it is better to mention again something from the same in Gherand Samhita in the 5th verse of the 1st chapter. What he says, as a person learns the first alphabets, what a beauty. That clears what exactly it is. Then becomes capable of learning the books By mastering the initial preparatory steps, one attains the knowledge of one's true nature. What is Hatha Yoga? Girish Jha says they both are contemporary. Hardly there is 100 years difference. So there is one way that we argue why the Hatha Yoga Pradipika has not mentioned this verse. Why they should mention? It's a topical text. Topical text refers to the complete text, and the complete text gives you the essence of it. Essence of it. The same thing Patanjali says, same thing. Now, see that, let us even go to the, again, Hatha Yoga Pradipika perhaps mentioned in the third chapter. That we will go later. But here in Sita mentions every basics in the very first chapter. What he says, the body a person receives based on the past karma, good or bad. The body leads to actions to fulfill one's desires, and desire leads to action. The cycle of karma goes on like a water wheel. Means what? We have to get out of this water wheel. That is why we need to practice Hatha Yoga. Okay, I want to leave that, directly go to the next verse of Hatha Yoga. Hatha Yoga. Now he says that Hatha Vidya, yogi desirous of success should keep the knowledge of Hatha Yoga secret. I have done this. So in the 12th verse, he directly comes down to the very external steps. Sapta sadhanam. No, this is again from the Hatha Yoga. So 12th. Let us go to the 12th verse of Hatha Yoga Pradipika. So where he says that Hatha Yoga, now he comes to the very basics, the external steps. Make a small room situated in a solitary place, being for measurement of the room, and you should have an access to the water, free from all the disturbances, etc., etc. So now he is going to the basics. Okay, that need not to be explained further. So then in the 13th verse, he explains the specification of a room. Now he says, 14th is very clear. Having been seated in such a room free from all the anxieties, he should practice yoga as instructed by his guru. Tell me which guru says Hatha Yoga is different from Raj Yoga. Hatha Yoga, Gyan Yoga, they are all different yoga. They all are one. I have a body, I have a mind, I have emotions, I have an intellect. Anyhow, 14th verse, come to the 15th. 15th. The following 6 causes destroys yoga. Now see that his topical text of Hatha Yoga has a different way of writing. Girish Jha is the form of a dialogue between the master and a disciple. That is a very commonly accepted norm of the Eastern wisdom. But here it means he has written the text in 4 chapters. He has picked up some of the principles in the first chapter, in the second chapter, and then he says this is the way you should be learning. So commonly accepted, but he tried his best. Overeating, exertion, talkativeness, adhering to rules, and unsteadiness of the body and the mind are the 6 obstacles of yoga. It is in the 15th. Atyahara prayasascha prajalapo niyamagraha janasanghascha lalyam cha shadbhir yogo vinashati. Do we ever teach in Hatha Yoga these 6 obstacles? The answer is no. We teach 100 postures. 5 posture, 15 posture is intermediate, 25, 40, 50 postures advanced Hatha Yoga. What? This is Hatha Yoga. Atyahara, prayasascha, overexertion, prajalapo, niyamagraha, jarasanghascha lalyam cha sharbhir yogo. Do we give due importance to the six obstacles while teaching Hatha Yoga? Answer is no. Then, do I teach the six helpers in yoga? So, look at the approach of Hatha Yoga, the 15th, 16th. Do I give the due importance to the six helpers of yoga? Utsa, sahas, dhairya, tattva jnanascha nishchayat. What is tattva jnana? Knowing the real self. Tattva jnanas. You find out the word tattva jnana in every text. Tattva jnana means knowing the real self. I must have the knowledge before I practice any yoga, any style of yoga, my friend. Janasangha, we don't pay attention. Oh, I have read the first chapter. Come on to the asanas. How many asanas are there? How many pranayamas are there? Even I don't follow the basics of Hatha Yoga Pradipika. Again, I'm stressing utsaha, sahas, courage, daring, perseverance, discriminative knowledge that is written in Old English. But here, the Tattva Jnana means the knowledge of the real self. Tattva means the reality. What is reality? Real self. We say, no, no, it's not right there. Fail, aloofness from the company, etc., etc., etc. Now, see, I told you before what I discussed. Yajnavalkya mentioned 10 yama. So the origin of the Hatha Yoga, Dattatreya, Yajnavalkya, he has mentioned same thing from the Yajnavalkya. He has not created his own version. He did not create his style. We have a wrong notion. We have a wrong perspective. Yahimsa satyam asteyam brahmacharya chama dhriti daya arjamam mitahara saucham chaiva yama dashah. There are 10 yama. Do we teach 10 yama? No. But we teach 100 postures. If we want to follow this text, follow this text. Tapa Santosh, so 10 niyamas. 10 niyamas. Then maybe if I remember correctly, this Hatha Yoga Pradipika mentions 15 postures. Why he has mentioned 15 postures and why Yajnavalkya mentions only 8 postures, why Patanjali mentions... No, leave Patanjali it as it. But origin of the Hatha Yoga coming from Dattatreya and Yajnavalkya, he mentions only 8 postures. Due to the difference in the period, after 800 years, people might have been living in ignorance. They do not want to grasp the knowledge, so that he said, okay, maybe 15th. So you have continuing. So now see the arrangement of the first chapter. He gives the basics. He left some of the things. It does not mean that he does not mean what the yoga tradition is. If the one yoga tradition is not there, call is mukta. So the pictures. Nasanam siddha kevalam padyasana, padmasana, singhasana. So I'm leaving those asanas in which you are a great expert on this. Bhojanam. So now see that if we go to the Gorakshasana, 58th verse, 59th, and there's, 59th comes. Now, because of Yajnavalkya explained something about the kundalini, so out of the way he mentioned after, you see in the 58th verse, Nadis should be cleaned of their impurities by performing the mudras. So he instantly jumps into the mudras in the 58th verse. Nadis has to be cleaned, the impurity to the purity. Then he mentioned something about the food that we will take up in the next lesson. Now tell me what doubt you have.
I don't have any doubt. Again, there's two uh, objectives I'm looking at. The first and foremost is for me to have real knowledge. And then the second is how do we translate this so it's easy to share the responsibility for the kids? I want to try to finish up these two girls training. I'm not as concerned about Hayden, but I want to get Avery on a more direct path and to getting her things done. So the aspect of teaching the girls is one way, but the more important objective is for me to understand. So when I'm reading and when I'm listening and when I'm note taking, that's for me to learn. And then whatever I can do that you think I should do to help bring this to light for them is the direction that will go. So I don't really have I don't have an opinion and I don't have any argument or disagreement with it. I just am reading and listening and note taking, and we'll contemplate it later. And I have no doubt that all the yogas aim at the same goal. I have no doubt of that. I do think that there are like the different paths, the different viewpoints. None of the masters saying one is better than the other, but them saying, if this doesn't work, take that path. If this doesn't work, take that path, depending on if you're more sattvic or rajic or tamasic, then this path may be better for you than that path. So maybe somebody who has more of an active mind needs to take the path of the Hatha yoga first so that they can learn more about how those practices will help calm their mind. Whereas somebody more like me, I don't need the physical practices to sit in a quiet space. I don't need to have a 60-minute practice to tire myself out to calm my mind. So I need less of the physical, even though that's my job. How I make some money in life, I don't need the physical practice for the calm. In fact, the physical practice takes from my calm. So I
What
don't
is
think I have
very
any argument.
important, what is very important, the first basic principle that even the Hatha Yoga mentions, and Krishna also mentions, in the fourth, I think, in the fourth chapter. He says to his friend that this is a royal secret. And it is an open secret. So I mentioned briefly that it is a royal secret to those who are not seekers. It will be kept secret. So the very first step is to become a seeker on the path. And the moment I become a seeker on the path, it becomes an open secret. So when the knowledge of yoga opens to me, then I have to decide which approach I should take. Because as a seeker, I know it clearly. First thing. Second thing, my master used to make it clear that you cannot reject body at the stake of intellect. The body mind, intellect, they all are integral part. That is why we explain the Panch Kosha. That is why we explain the three bodies. So when it is open to me, I sit and start doing the asana, but my mind lives in a higher level of self awareness. I don't need the practice. Too much, too many asanas. Another part that is also with reference to the Hatha Yoga is very clear. To have many styles of yoga, I accept every knowledge. I have no problem. But whether any of these styles focus on the knowledge, the goal of yoga. So it is not mentioned in these texts, but it is very clear from the Vedic tradition. We say Anubandha Chatushtaya, fourfold connection. What is the goal of life? Be very clear before you start the goal. Yoga. What is the goal of life? Two goals: to discover my real self, to be in permanent peace and happiness, to bring an end to the suffering. That is the goal. What is the subject matter? How do I bring an end to the suffering? That is 100% clear implicitly. Masters have referred again and again, those who follow this tradition. Second is, what exactly is the subject matter? Who am I? What is this world? And what is the existence? This, all the three is known as Tattva Jnana. I have already pointed you out in a particular verse. That is known as Tattva Jnana. Second, so subject matter is clear, the goal is clear. Now, the secret is open to me because I have become a seeker and I can relate myself to the knowledge of the Eastern wisdom to find the real self depending on my nature, temperament, because I am a seeker. So these are the four connections. If we do not clearly understand these four connections, we may do any practice. It may not work.